All right. Good morning again, everybody. Thank you, Nick. I have the modest task of brainwashing all of you to believe in our vision. Nick has kind of laid it out in, why are we here, just kind of as the rationale, why are we even talking about this? And I'm going to go a lot deeper, and hopefully it will start to resonate. So the spoiler is, again, we have the vision. It's not just ours, but it's the one we're advancing, and we want you all to leave today bought into that vision, believing it, but also we want you to help evolve it and push the boundaries as we go today. So it is a two-way, or really many voices in this conversation, not just one way, and I think I hope there will be opportunities for you all to feel like you're making that contribution. But before I do that, I want to tell you really briefly about myself. So I've been living and breathing Forever Green for 3 years, and yet I think I may not be as well known to this community as I might be. So really quick rundown. I am basically a suburban kid who's obsessed with farming. And I attribute that to my grandparents and their farm in Illinois, which you can see up there. And as well as my time in my first 2 years of college, I got to go to this amazing school on a working ranch in the high desert of California and be involved in managing cattle in this very fragile ecosystem. Here's another image of that landscape to show you kind of how harsh it was. And that was a deeply, shaping experience for me as a young person to think about how do we do agriculture in a way that can be truly sustainable in the sense, can we still be doing this in hundreds and hundreds of years, and that is in tune with this fragile ecosystem. And this ranch, through holistic management, through, surprise, a wide range of partnerships across sectors, was able to do that in a really meaningful way and thrive where other ranches were losing their access to public lands because of the damage that was occurring. So that was a really big inspiration for me. That led me to policy work. I'm kind of a weird hybrid of a policy person and a scientist, which is perfect for this role for me. I get to bring both of those to this position. And just to bring it full circle, my parents, after me growing up in the suburbs, went back to farming. And so, just last weekend, and as much as I can, get to be on a CLC 100% pasture farm in southeast Minnesota. So my journey with Forever Green started as a postdoc in Dr. Jake Younger's lab, also with Craig Schaefer in 2018. I was away for a few years, and then I came back about 3 years ago as the associate director, basically apprenticing with Thom, trying to figure out, how can we pass on the leadership of our R&D program. He knew that eventually he would have to accept retirement, and so there was, and Nick as well, there was a proactivity around let's bring people in to expand who knows where the bodies are buried. And so that started happening. So we did a few things. We established an R&D executive committee. And so we have that executive committee here that deepens and broadens the faculty leadership. And then Don progressively handed more stuff over to me, running the grant program, interacting with the legislature, et cetera. And then last summer, the end came suddenly for Don, and far too soon. And amidst the shock of that loss, we kept moving based on the groundwork that Don had laid. So the executive committee, including George, hi George, stepped up to provide deeper guidance. I became co-director. Around the same time, we hired Ann Kirby as our director of partnerships and outreach. And so for the first time, we actually had a full-time staff person overseeing research, commercialization, or partnerships, and with Colin Commercialization. And then, and I'm paying for it right now with the amount of sleep I'm getting, we made an interesting decision. We decided that despite being down a man, despite losing a key leader, we weren't just going to kind of go into idle and try to sort out the pieces. We were going to stand up and push harder than ever before to advance this vision and secure Don's legacy. And that is why we're all here today for the first ever Forever Green Forum. Okay, today, and Nick alluded to this, today I'm the messenger. We're calling this Forever Green's vision, and it is, but this is not ours alone. This has been built by many people. Even though, yes, Don was a bona fide visionary validated by the New York Times. What I want to note, too, is, again, this is not baked. The idea today, one of our many goals, is to evolve this vision with all of you. So what is the vision? Don summed it up best in his immortal words: cover the damn soil. Many of you have probably heard him say that. We couldn't put it on the shirts with the U of M branding that we had yesterday, but we can put it on a slide. So why is this the crux? Again, I was down at my parents' farm this past weekend, southeast Minnesota, and on the drive there and back, I saw a lot of fields that look like this. If you squint, you can see some soybeans or some corn coming up, right? It's just starting. And so that field has had no living plant cover since harvest last fall, and there are probably 17 million acres of farmland in Minnesota alone that are in that state. You can see it from space, and Don dubbed it the big brown spot. This is the crux of what we're trying to address. This is so widespread, so normal and ubiquitous that I don't think we really see it anymore. We just accept this is how we do agriculture. And, you know, sometimes when you look at this, you can see problems. You can see soil eroding away. You can see soil blowing in the wind. But most of the time when you look at a field like this, you can't see the fundamental problems that it is creating. You can't see carbon being chewed up by microbes and going up into the atmosphere, contributing to climate change. But it is happening every second, and the balance is in the wrong direction if you don't have green living plant cover on that soil. You also don't see the nitrate that's being drawn down through that soil by rain into our waterways. And you're also not seeing wildlife habitat. You're not seeing flowers for pollinators. You're not seeing crops that are growing the things we need because they're not there. So you take this field in southeast Minnesota, and soon these crops are going to start kicking. And so we're going to have great production, great growth, green cover in June, July, August, September, 1, 2, 3, 4 months. And then it's going to be harvested in October and go back to this state. So with continuous living cover, as Nick alluded to, we can reverse all of those dynamics. Instead of carbon going up into the soil, or up into the air, we'll have green living plants that are drawing it down through photosynthesis. Instead of the nitrate going down to the waterways, we've got deep, dense root systems that are taking that nitrate back up and actually making something useful out of it. And we can be providing pollinator habitat and a range of other benefits. So this aspect, this environmental aspect, is the first piece of our vision, and that's probably what people know us for best. So what is the vision? We're working for millions of acres of continuous living cover agriculture. Yes, in Minnesota, yes, in the upper Midwest, and hopefully as a model that can be adopted in temperate agroecosystems around the world. What we do here is not relevant directly to the tropics. It's fine. There's millions and millions of other acres that need a solution like this to deal with the same challenges. But CLC agriculture doesn't just improve the environment. It can also be a more efficient form of agriculture. Right now, we are letting a lot of sunlight and precipitation go to waste because this is what we've got in the landscape. We've got very little cover in April, the beginnings of cover in May. And we get a lot of sunlight and we get a lot of rainfall in those months. And then, yes, in the middle of the season, when we're at the peak, we have pretty good, it's still partial in June. But July, August, we're cranking, and then we go back to very little cover in October. And those of you who were on the field tour yesterday saw this for yourselves. You saw pennycress that's almost ready to harvest at the end of May. You saw, kernza that's put on this much biomass. Across the state, farmers are taking their first cutting of hay. So we can have productive agriculture between when the snow melts and today. We just don't have good systems and tools for farmers to do that. And if we can go that direction, we can produce more of the things that we need from society, food, feed, fiber, et cetera. That means more opportunities for farms to turn a profit, more stuff to sell, more diversification of their operation. And by protecting the soil all year round, in the face of more extreme weather, more 2-inch and 3-inch rainfalls and fewer nice, slow soaking rains, we can keep the soil where it needs to be, and that contributes to climate resilience. So CLC agriculture has the potential, if we do it right, to make farms more successful and more resilient to shocks from the market and from Mother Nature. And so that is part of our vision as well, which might not be as widely understood. Successful and resilient farms and agricultural businesses. Okay, but a vision that stopped here would really be no vision at all, because I haven't said anything about the people working on those farms and in those businesses. And successful farms and businesses are important, but they're really a means to a social end. If people can succeed in farming, if they can build agricultural businesses that are financially secure, it creates a path for the next generation to come into farming and a future for rural communities that depend on agriculture. Those of you who were lucky enough to be at the Seal Prize event last night heard Carmen Fernholz speak to this in an incredibly moving way. That man's passion for this work and what we can dream of and hope for and work towards for rural communities is an incredible inspiration to me, and it is helping to shape our vision. We all know the long-term socioeconomic trends in agriculture and rural communities. The trends are not good, okay, socioeconomically in rural communities. We know that. Nothing has been able to stem that broader tide, but there are bright spots. We've got Regen Ag Alliance and Tree Range Farms in the room. That's a bright spot. We've got the example of grass-based dairy, where you can be small and prosperous at the same time. Another bright spot. And these occur where you have innovative farmers, rural businesses, and supportive partners that all come together to build something that has real economic value and a social fabric. And so that's what we want to build with CLC Agriculture, and I believe that we're starting that process and making good progress with many of you in this room today. We can't reverse those big trends, but we can commit to doing this in a way that takes advantage of every opportunity to bend the curves. And that's our commitment. So to do this and not recreate the status quo, we have to do two things. We have to partner with groups that are building new models, so we're trying to do that. And when we do partner with incumbent groups, which we do need to do as well, we need to work with them to bring new models forward that advance these values at the same time. And so if we succeed at that, scaling up CLC agriculture can contribute to healthy and prosperous rural communities. And that is the third piece of our vision and what we hope that millions of acres of CLC can deliver. There's no one big lever that any one institution can pull to get us there. There are thousands of little levers, and we need all of this, everyone in this room, and everyone in our networks to be pulling together. So I hope that this vision resonates with you, but the vision alone is not sufficient. We have to have a good strategy, and we have to know how far can we actually get. So these are the questions that motivated the Forever Green Partnership to work on this report, Putting Down Roots. You are about to get the extreme elevator pitch version of what we did. We're trying to figure out what's the potential environmental and economic effects of scaling CLC. The focus is Minnesota for this report to make it tractable. Again, this vision and the impact can be broader. We looked at a range of CLC cropping systems. We focused on a few environmental variables, nitrogen loss, soil loss, greenhouse gas emissions, and a couple of economic variables, on-farm crop revenue, net returns. We actually have the modeler for this study in the room. Will, raise your hand. Will was awesome. And this is inherent in work like this, a zillion simplifying assumptions. You have to make simplifying assumptions to get to results that are tractable. So that's the context. I'm going to be showing you results from the medium scenario. Medium adoption amounts, number of acres, and medium impact. There's always a range, there's uncertainty, so we wanted to be conservative. And here's what the projections look like. So you have conventional crops at the top, traditional cover crops that are not harvested in the middle, and CLC crops at the bottom, which right now is basically, as far as acreage impact, forages and pasture. And so as we click forward, with some assumptions about what are the economics, where do we have positive signals in terms of on-farm revenue, how can we imagine an aggressive transition to continuous living cover? This is not what happens if we rest on our laurels. This is what happens if we push really, really hard. 2035, we've made a big increase in winter annual oilseeds. You'll hear a lot about that today. And perhaps there's an increase in forage and pasture. Maybe we don't try to have dairies in the desert anymore, and we need to have dairies back where we can actually grow crops with rainfall. That might be an important national or global trend. And then by 2050, a very aggressive outlook. And so 5.5 million acres of winter annual oilseeds, 1.5 million acres of winter annual cereals and legumes, some continued growth in the forage and pasture space, and then other perennials, perennial grains, perennial oilseeds, et cetera, contributing about another 1 million acres. This is about the scale that our first cut, relatively deep analysis shows us we could potentially get to by 2050 if we push really hard, and we are all pulling all those levers together. Note that conventional cover crops do grow. So we're not saying it's all about continuous living cover in the market-driven way that we see. I'm getting a real yellow card this time. It's a part of a bigger picture. And I think we can get there, Ann. There are lots of challenges. Well, impact, major reductions in nitrogen loss, never been able to achieve that. Whitney, Steve, others have been working on it for 40 years, have never bent the curve. But this suggests that we really could do it. Similar for soil erosion, we've made a lot of progress with no-till. We've got a long ways to go. And on-farm greenhouse gas emissions could be significantly reduced. These are some pretty conservative assumptions that went into this. Winter oilseeds were not included. Winter oilseeds may increase your on-farm emissions a bit, but when you take out jet fuel and diesel fuel, the trade-off and the balance for the climate is really, really positive. And on-farm revenues, projected a 3% increase in on-farm revenues, a 20% increase in on-farm net returns by being a lower input, lower cost system. So does this mean it's an economic slam dunk for farmers? Absolutely not. But this is an indication that we're going in the right direction. And compared to any other agricultural conservation practice, not any other, many others, I should say, this is a real distinguishing factor. The fact that maybe it's not a get-rich-quick scheme, but you can do well by doing good, and ultimately the market can incentivize the adoption of these crops, and we can get away from perpetual government subsidies. All right, I have got to keep going. I'm going to skip a couple of pieces. I just want to tee up the next couple of talks. So Forever Green is organized in a pretty unique way. We have our research and development core. We have commercialization, adoption, and scaling that work hand in hand to give technology push and market pull to get things out into the landscape. The third piece of the stool is the Forever Green Partnership that provides societal lift. And so this tees me up to hand the, well, shoot. I was going to talk more about R&D. I'm going to skip that part. I hope you all understand that we do some pretty awesome interdisciplinary R&D. Leave it at that. Look at all those crops. They're so pretty. We have a team behind every single one of them. Nobody does that except us. Sorry, not true. We have many great partners. I'll leave it at that. All right, Colin, why don't you come up and rescue this train wreck?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
How you doing?
Great.
Yeah. Feel like you're on a Shinkansen bullet train? Yeah. All right, great. Okay, so thankful you're all here. I'm Colin Cureton, Forever Green's Director of Commercialization, Adoption, and Scaling. I'll say CAS for short. We like long names in academia. The CAS program is the approach we have to moving Forever Green crops into the market and onto the landscape. I've been with Forever Green for the last 6 years and have been involved in some degree in onboarding everyone currently on staff. I only remind them of that when I'm in front of big groups of people. While we lost Don suddenly last year, and that transition has been hard, I've actually never been more excited about where Forever Green is and hopeful for our future. Now, since we're here to talk about innovating for systemic change in agriculture, I want to start with a note on innovation. You always hear the word, you never talk about what it is, right? So people often think of innovation as a new app, widget, or technology, something you can hold and use. But innovation experts agree that innovation comes in many forms. Yes, it's new products, but it's also new processes, services, organizational, and programmatic models. So what I'd like to ask is that you see Forever Green's CAS program as an innovation itself. The work we do is as innovative and necessary a component as the science our R&D teams are doing and the work farmers are doing on their farms. So you heard from Mitch and Nick that we have seemingly intractable problems to diversify agriculture, to cover the damn soil, and further that the capacities of organizations and institutions thus far to facilitate systemic change has been fairly limited. Critiques of the status quo and failed ventures to address it abound. The CAS program is a rare opportunity to be a bridge over the chasm between science, markets, farms, and impact. But how? There are a lot of theories and ideas with lots of figures that look like this, with bubbles and arrows pointing everywhere. I could talk about each one of these figures for an hour. This involves all kinds of factors like farmer decision-making and cross-sector innovation processes, adoption curves, the valley of death, but there aren't really many practical guides. Darn. So, we have organized our work in Forever Green into 4 main categories. We have limited capacity and time to execute on moving these crops out to the landscape and to the market. And these 4 areas are as follows. We've come to organize this work in strategy, market development, landscape, and operations. This has been developed, informed by experience, seeing what works, and mostly by seeing what doesn't work. Okay, so strategy. I put a couple common sense wisdom quotes from Dr. Don Wyse here. He stopped me once and he said, we were negotiating with a partner, and he said, you don't get to pick your options, but you can shape the outcome. Do the best you can and advance the mission. So just like any business or organization, strategy is critical in determining success. You can't just have a vision. You need a strategy for how to get it done. Don used to say, don't just run around doing stuff. What's your plan? Our strategy work, perhaps more than any other, determines the direction of forever green crops in the world. Someone actually has to decide where these crops will go, who will have the rights and responsibilities to take them to market. What are our strategic objectives with these crops? What regions and rotations do they work in? What partnership opportunities do we have that can go the distance? It's a big responsibility, fraught with complexity, with major implications for the future of whole industries. Like Mitch said, no pressure. Take Kernza and Camelina, for example, two very different crops. They each have a different path toward the market. On that path, we face a series of considerations, including how ready is the crop? What are our goals and values? What are our non-negotiables? Is there IP around it? What's the strength of that IP? What are the applications and uses? What markets can it move into? What's the competitive landscape in those markets? What are the opportunities we actually have to enter those markets with partners that can deliver? What are the risks and rewards of working with those partners? And can we close any of those partnerships? This can lead to very different industries for forever green crops. For example, you have the Kernza industry, the proto industry, characterized by 5 startup companies, many of them grower-led. With Camelina, we're working with one of the largest processors in the world, Cargill, on advancing this crop into the marketplace. Both are very exciting strategies, but they're very different. This is strategy work. Enough said. Okay, moving forward. On to the market. Next, we have our market development program. I mentioned this before farmer adoption for a reason, obviously not because we don't care about that, just the opposite. You want to help a farmer, give them a market. There's a natural impulse to think about the next step for a crop moving into the world to be going into a farmer's planter. But strategically, more and more I believe our next task is to develop robust market partnerships that can create demand pull for CLC crops. This gives clear demand signals to growers, reduces risk, and builds public and consumer awareness of these crops before they go in the planter, before they're in the bin. Catherine Chute will mention more on the mechanics of our market development efforts later. At the level of vision, we see a future for CLC agriculture that includes small and medium-sized businesses that support thriving rural communities. We envision opportunities for entrepreneurship where talented and creative leaders of all ages can move back to their hometowns and start a business, as several have. We also envision leadership from major industry players who find forever green crops to be major opportunities to develop new markets, deliver on their sustainability metrics, and meet shifting consumer demands. Every scale has a role to play, and we are beginning to differentiate our strategies for actors of different scales, and you'll hear more about that later. At the macro scale, we envision CLC crops under development by Forever Green will create whole new markets, in some cases on the scale of canola. This is very exciting. In other cases, like perennial and winter grains, improving sustainability profile of major commodity markets, such as wheat and barley. In cases such as hazelnuts, this will open high-value specialty crop opportunities for upper Midwest growers in global markets with strong projected midterm growth. We fully expect forever green crops to be competitive in sectors of US, North American, and global agriculture. This will be an innovative approach that reverberates far from here, not unlike the Green Revolution 75 years ago, but oriented toward 21st century challenges and opportunities. Okay, onto the landscape. Our landscape program supports farmer adoption of CLC crops. You'll hear more about this later as well. Our vision for forever green crops is that farmers are presented with market opportunities and they're supported in the transition to CLC agriculture. And this transition will be both successful, profitable, and better sustain our natural resources. About 5 years ago, fresh on the job, we had to decide how to deploy $500,000 to support farmer adoption. It was a fascinating opportunity to develop something in the real world I was trained to think about in agricultural policy and applied economics, something that would have real impact on the bleeding edge of innovation. I studied ecosystem service markets, incentive and TA programs, and the state's nutrient reduction goals. I noticed that incentive payments were usually flat per acre rather than model or outcomes based, and that almost no one was meaningfully sharing risk with growers. This was a conversation I had with a grower that really shaped the direction of what I'm about to tell you about the ECO program. The quote here demonstrated that there was really a gap in risk sharing for these crops. The state had a priority to cover drinking water source management areas, TA for these new crops was also lacking. We bundled up all these challenges and developed the program called ECO, which stands for Economic and Environmental Clusters of Opportunity. I always take the moment to mention that in Greek, the prefix eco, found in both ecology and economy, means home. So, we need to take care of our home. ECO provides model-based variable water quality payments and outcomes-based risk management payments. It pays for seed and grain testing costs, and it provides TA from a field agronomist and organizes regional TA providers and interfaces with industry and academic agronomists. About 200 fields have enrolled in ECO of about 9,000 acres to date. The state has invested $1.7 million in this program. I believe this is now a piloted, tested program that's ready for scale up here in Minnesota, and we would love to see other states adopt this model. More on ECO later. Very exciting. Okay, finally, our fourth major area of work is operations. Perhaps less meta level, but there's a lot to get done. We need to do what we said we'd do, and we need to be where we said we'd be. We manage a seed and grain testing system, plant material transfer agreements for dozens of partners in research and industry. We initiate dozens of NDAs. We distribute totes and tube fans, seed to growers, samples to industry, and host a dozen field days a year or more. This area of work is worth mentioning because as the late Don Wyse said, we do real stuff. And this is actually a quote he mentioned to me. Thinking back on it all, taking that bag of seed to that farmer might just be the most important thing I ever did. Okay, finally, this innovation is possible because the CAS program is comprised of a stellar team with diverse talents. In these 6 people, we have the following talents to draw from: 2 MBAs, 2 applied economists, 2 agronomy masters, a seed salesman, a policy analyst, 1 anthropologist, a photographer, a geographer and GIS whiz, and lastly, it's worth mentioning that all the CAS members are relatively young as far as agriculture goes. We're all millennials, and with recent hires, now Gen Z. We're able to draw personally on the recent on the market instincts and needs of the next generation, taking over the farm, emerging farmers, and the consumer instincts of young parents, tech-savvy, and sustainability-oriented folks. Since you won't hear from all of these folks today, I want to take a moment to recognize the team. Okay, that's all for me. Our next speaker, Whitney Clark, Executive Director of Friends of the Mississippi River and core leader of the Forever Green Partnership. I like to think of Whitney as a voice of care and conscience for the Mississippi River and for water. Thank you. Welcome, Whitney.
Thank you, Colin. Wow, it is so exciting to be here with you all today. My role today is to introduce you to the third pillar that Mitch mentioned of the Forever Green platform, which we refer to as societal lift. This is the scope of work that includes intentionally creating the social conditions, the public support, and the policy environment for these emerging crops and markets to grow and thrive at a landscape scale. I don't have a lot of time today, so instead of taking you through a whole deck of slides and numbers, I'm just going to tell you a quick story. A story about a river conservation organization, why a river conservation organization has become so deeply invested in this vision of continuous living cover. As this room no doubt knows, agriculture is the predominant source of pollutants to the Mississippi River, and the Mississippi River is very, very impaired. But it's not just the river. Nearly half of statewide lakes, rivers, and streams are impaired. And it's not just surface water. We have a groundwater pollution crisis in Minnesota. In 8 counties in southeastern Minnesota, it's unsafe to drink the water. And in agricultural areas around the state, we have elevated nitrate in many of both public and private drinking water supplies. So as a water quality advocacy organization, we spent a number of years trying to figure out, is there a way that we could apply the Clean Water Act regulatory framework that was so successful at addressing point sources of pollution to agriculture? And around 2012, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency released a report that really got our attention. The agency modeled the scale of change and the actions that would need to be taken to reach the state's goal of reducing nitrogen in the Mississippi River by 45%. That's the Gulf Dead Zone goal. And the report was interesting. It demonstrated that even a regulatory program that required all the current agricultural best practices, maximizing nutrient application efficiency, no-till, stream buffers, drainage management, wouldn't get us to clean water, not even close. So that really got our attention and made us question some of our long-term assumptions. But what would work? Well, the report pointed to living cover if we could somehow get it established at a landscape scale. So that brings us to the partnership with Forever Green. About this time, we were coming into relationship and dialogue with the agroecological vision of Dr. Nick Jordan and Dr. Don Wyse. And their idea was, instead of continuing to let the markets externalize the adverse impacts of production, what if we could reverse the polarity of the economics and make the economic system drive the environmental and social outcomes that we so desperately need and want? But a transformation in agriculture of this nature and at this scale, we knew would require a partnership across sectors and disciplines. The U of M is, of course, a world-class agricultural research institution, and Forever Green has tremendous capabilities in plant breeding and agronomy, but they need Nick and Don, and we realized that there was going to need to be a broader partnership to carry out the emerging vision. In addition to the core capabilities that the U of M and some of their research partners who are here today would be bringing, we would also need a partnership made up of farmers and farm organizations, businesses, both large and small, across the value chain. And of course, NGOs like the Minnesota Environmental Partnership, Friends of the Mississippi River, Greenland's Blue Waters, who had expertise and relationships in public policy and advocacy. And so all that was starting to come together in our minds, and the idea of the Forever Green Partnership was born. So within the societal lift pillar, we're focused on three primary tools and strategies: narrative and communications, equity, or what we call Forever Equitable, and public policy, innovation, and advocacy. And I'll share just very briefly a little bit about each of those. You've already heard from Mitch about the Putting Down Roots report that we, Friends of the Mississippi River and Forever Green, published in 2023. And those results were in some ways us kind of checking our own math to make sure that we were on the right track. But we're very pleased with the results, as you could see from Mitch's slides. And with this report, the intention here is to change the story of what agriculture is capable of contributing to our society and painting a picture of what we can be working toward together. And that's really what today is about. Forever Equitable is the name for our work to incorporate equity as a key value and core principle. So as we build this emergent agricultural sector, we're working to embed principles and strategies that incorporate the interests of those who are most vulnerable. For example, Forever Green is now partnering with innovators working on the land access problem for young, resource-poor, and BIPOC farmers. This work is developing novel land access models in which these farmers rent land from regeneratively minded landowners on the premise that the farmers will practice regenerative CLC agriculture on this cropland. It's very, very exciting work. Policy, innovation, and advocacy. I think it's self-evident that if this Forever Green vision is going to come to full fruition, it will require a full slate of catalyzing public and private investments and supportive public policy, just as we have for our dominant commodities. To accomplish that, we're building a coalition, some of whom you can see here, to carry out this work, and we've already notched several important wins. Peter LaFontaine from my organization is going to be talking this afternoon about some of this policy work, so I will be very brief here. But I think we can all be extremely encouraged by the strong bipartisan support in the Minnesota legislature for stable funding for the Forever Green research, development, and commercialization functions. Our longstanding target for many years has been 10 million per biennium to support this work, and this year we reached 8.75 million. The funding provides this core foundation for all this critical work, and Forever Green is then turning every of those dollars into $5 more, as Representative Cleavorn said. And it's probably now a good moment for me to recognize the important leadership we've received from the legislature. Representative Cleavorn is with us. We heard from her earlier. Are there any other legislators in the House today? All right, maybe some will be joining us later, but can't say enough for the important support. And nobody has been a more tenacious advocate for this than Representative Cleavorn. So thank you for making this happen. And of course, Commissioner Petersen is with us today, and always supportive of this vision, and I know he's going to be with us all day. One final example in this public policy, innovation, and advocacy area of work is the Camelina Million Acre Study, and you'll be hearing more about this today. We're just launching it in partnership with the Minnesota SAF Hub, Embold, and McKnight. This is going to be an analysis that provides a roadmap for how to scale up the first 1 million acres of camelina as an ultra-low carbon feedstock for supplying the emerging sustainable aviation fuel market in Minnesota. And it will provide policy advocates like me and legislators like Representative Cleavorn with a detailed list of supportive policy actions needed for this truly sustainable feedstock to take flight. So that's it for me. Throughout the day, you're going to be hearing a lot more about the work that I've shared, and I'm really looking forward to spending the day with you and learning with you together. Thank you.
We're going to turn now to a little bit of interactivity. We want to get your brains engaged even more. And so we're going to bring a couple of folks up to help us kind of make sense of what we're hearing. Okay, so we're going to let this populate, and as that populates, I want to bring two people to the front, Dr. Don Wyse-Pester and Aaron Reeser. Don is the Director of Innovation at Winfield United, part of Land O'Lakes, and as the daughter and former student of Forever Green co-founder Dr. Don Wyse, she's probably been hearing about this vision longer than any of us, so an appropriate person to help us reflect on it. And Aaron Reeser is the Associate Director of Greenland's Blue Waters, a great thinker on all things CLC, and a veteran of the early days of Kearns of Commercialization, among other of our efforts together. I just want to hand it over to Don first to reflect for a few minutes on what you've heard this morning, and also what is coming up behind you.
I am Dawn Wyse-Pester. I did my undergraduate here at the University of Minnesota. I sat right there in that row, and I took Dr. Wise's class in weed science. Dr. Wyse had a journey in his career. He did his PhD on glyphosate, right? Glyphosate. I did my first career at Monsanto and launched WeatherMax, PowerMax. And we still lived together. And we still got along together. So I wanted to share that he would fill this room with graduate students in his weed science class. And where did they venture off to? Industry. In very similar careers that I had and still do. His career, it changed, right? It went from true weed science, developing and new chemistries, to really seeing a change in agriculture, and now moving into what we know today as Forever Green. He changed, but he also brought partners along with him in that change, just like Jenny mentioned. Republicans, Democrats, industry, all of you. So, when I look at this board, the grand challenge, it's hard. It's going to take a lot of time. But don't forget the change that Don went through. And he also reached back to those people that he taught in this classroom that are in industry. Last night we had a SEAL prize. Who was there? Who got the nomination? Who got the award? Right? You were there? Who was there? Carmen. Carmen, where are you? Congratulations. So Don and Carmen got some really great recognition in their work in Forever Green and organic farming and production. Who other two people got the recognition? Graham brothers. And what do they represent? Industry. In what production? Corn, soy, right? Those primary acres that we're all thinking about today going after. Our acres today in farming, are they going up? Nope, they're going down. So the level of influence that we have to think about today is on those acres. But Nick knows what Don would often say, and Nick used this word a couple of times today and yesterday, shoulder. Share the acre, figure out how to partner, figure out how to scale when you got a corn and soybean on that acre today that you need to influence. If you're thinking about scale, and that's Colin's big piece right now, how to get to the 1 million acres, you're fighting with that corn and soybean acre that the grower knows very well today. How to teach them differently, how to think about that differently, how to think about that risk that they're going to take on, that Carmen has had to take on to move new crops to that acre. That's our grand challenge. Working with people like myself, with those Graham brothers. Don taught and promoted and moved through great University of Minnesota graduates. Influenced them. They're out there. Why aren't those Graham brothers in this room today? So I leave you with those thoughts. I'm excited to be here. I have heard about his vision. I think it's a right vision to go through. It's a grand challenge, and I know we're all in and up for it with great leaders in the room to take us forward. But make sure you're reaching back and influencing the ones that you can influence to scale. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Don. Erin.
Yeah, thank you, Don. I'm just watching the words back here, and I'm very pleased and not surprised to see collaborative as the lead. That certainly fits the Forever Green vision and the way that really the only way I think that this work can move forward. And I've also been watching strategic and aspirational kick back and forth and think that's really important for what needs to happen with this work moving forward, especially sort of balancing between the need to be planful and to allow for emergence. And I heard that in the vision from all three speakers. One thing that I wanted to come back to is what Nick said at the beginning about how much is being asked of agriculture. And I think that's true, and we should be asking a lot of agriculture. We need agriculture to provide a lot of things, but I also think in other ways it's not new. You know, it has been possible for humans to eat without destroying the environment or social fabric and have needs met in terms of fuel and fiber. And as I was listening to you, Nick, I was really thinking, you know, we're all here because we work in some way related to agriculture. And if our work is not serving water and soil and wildlife and farmers economically in rural communities, what are we doing? What are we doing if agriculture is not working in those ways? Which I think, you know, again, aligns with the vision and brings us all here. And we need to be very real about our purpose and how we spend our time and our capacity individually in our roles related to the Forever Green vision and collectively. I was laughing at your thought on needing your job as brainwashing people into the Forever Green vision. I actually think that's a pretty easy job. I mean, why are we all here? Because we all believe in some way in the Forever Green vision. And I think a lot about roles and how people work together and role clarity. And I would challenge everybody here, or not even challenge, invite you to really think about, okay, what is my role in this work individually or organizationally, and how does that intersect with Forever Green? I think that's the question here today, understanding where Forever Green is going and understanding your individual and organizational purpose relative to Forever Green, and think about where the intersection is. That's my question for all of you and all of us. You know, what can I offer Forever Green? What can I get from Forever Green? How do we work together? There's a lot more that could be said, but I think I'll keep it brief. And I wanted to come back to Don's legacy, of course, that is mentioned over and over. And one of my favorite things that Don would say is that the work is not only about growing crops, but it's about growing people. And I think that that's so true. I've been working for Greenland's Blue Waters for 10 years now, about 10 years, and working with Forever Green for 10 years. And even in 10 years, which is a blink of time in agriculture, just seeing the importance of investing in people and watching where people go in 5 years and 10 years and how those relationships continue is a really critical piece. I think maybe the last thing I'd say is coming back to how Colin introduced Whitney as care and conscience relative to the Mississippi River. So with all of this work and the vision, which is incredibly critical and timely and needed and needs to be done at scale and needs to be done in a very real way that's working on farm and working in markets, I think that we need to do that work with care and conscience. That's how it will endure and that's how it will grow. Thanks.
Chris Patton, President, Founder of Midwest Elderberry. I related very strongly to your scaling in the standpoint of what we and our co-op are doing as part of Forever Green is scaling up elderberry, a wild crop that's hand harvested and hand processed into something that can be hundreds of acres instead of dozens of acres, and eventually, God willing, thousands.
Thanks for the good work.
Vanessa Kulik-Price. I obviously respect the need to be state and regional specific, but recognizing that you all aren't working in isolation with what's happening in other regions and across the country, can you speak to a little bit more about how this your vision is scalable to the rest of the country or interacting with what's going on in the South, in the Southwest? I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
I can take that one. You know, very perceptive. We talk a lot about Minnesota. We get a lot of state of Minnesota funding, and so we need to be delivering value back to the state. And yet the vision and the ambition clearly goes beyond our borders. So I think that there's a capacity aspect to this answer, and there's also like an agroecology, geography aspect to this answer, which is, you know, what we do, not relevant in Florida, right? So there's only so far that the crops that we develop and the systems that we work on can move, but probably relevant in Ukraine, you know, and parts of South America. And so finding these similar agroecologies around the globe where this approach could be applicable and hopefully beneficial, that is absolutely in scope of our ambitions, but then you hit the capacity issue. And so we only have so many people, we only have so many partners. We would love, and with the right support and partnership, we'd love to bring this to, let's say, other parts of the Great Lakes, you know, that are dealing with very similar water quality challenges and have similar cropping systems and climates. So absolutely the potential is there. I also think that there's something about grabbing onto a problem and actually trying to solve it, you know, and not just kind of spreading this message evangelically everywhere, but we learn so much by trying to do even the littlest things that ought to be simple. We have to be doing those things or else it's all hand wavy. So I think that having this as our testing ground is a really important part of the model.
Well, welcome back from our mini break, and I am looking forward to moving to a more interactive moment in our forum today in the form of this panel of extremely thoughtful and experienced people who are going to share some perspectives on the vision of the project of continuous living cover and how we advance that you have heard, and share with us some reflections on how that vision intersects with what they are trying to do in their own work, the long history of work that each of them has. And first, though, I'm going to do some quick introductions of these folks, starting with Rachel Stroer, who's on my left here. So Rachel is president of the Land Institute, which has been a truly essential partner to Forever Green for decades around the development of perennial grains. Carmen Fernholz is our longtime friend and thought and action partner. He farms near Madison, Minnesota, and notably was a longtime close friend and collaborator with Don Wyse. Thom Petersen is Commissioner of Agriculture and has been a tremendous also thought and action partner and supporter of Forever Green. Madison Rasmussen is a talented baker of Kernza shortbreads and is also the owner of River Rock Kitchen and Baking Company, which is a wholesale baker in St. Peter, Minnesota. And she puts Kernza in lots of things, not just shortbread. Lyle DePauw has come south of the border to join us today. He's Director of Crop Innovation at Cargill and has a lot of experience in the Canadian canola industry, the development of that's very relevant to what we're trying to do with several of our new crops. Haley Burns is Senior Program Officer at Builders Initiative and has been a core supporter of Forever Green as well. And Haley's work is in the intersection of agriculture and climate in the Midwest region. And then finally, Steve Morse is the Executive Director of Minnesota Environmental Partners, a former senator, an apple grower, and someone who's been an extremely valuable partner in the Forever Green Partnership, and lots of things that have come from that. So that's who we have up front, and I'm going to blend together two questions among the three that we've designed. And the blended question is, what do you think of the vision, and how does it relate to the work you are trying to do? What do you think of the vision, and how does it relate to the work that you're trying to do? And Commissioner, would you be willing to take the first shot at that both and question?
Well, I took a chance sitting on the end that I'd either be first or last, so I was
it didn't work.
Yeah, dang it. Well, because it's just, it's so much, it's a lot just sitting here and looking at watching the word scramble or whatever we call it, and just seeing all the different pieces and everything that comes along with it. But I think, to what gets, as Commissioner of Agriculture, I kind of look at, it's even our mission is to, help farmers be profitably, do it in a way that helps our environment. All these things fit in, very well and helps the state into what Forever Green is. So that, it's real easy for us to work on. But at the same time, Senator Morse and I were talking last night that it's been almost, 10 years or more since we've had funding. And so then we kind of look at where are we going on this? And a lot of times as somebody who's worked on like funding at a state level, I also, have to defend that a lot of times too and say like, well, this is why we're doing this and this is where we're going to get to. And, and I'm an optimist. I probably couldn't do this job if I wasn't an optimist. And I always say that I do see, a lot of progress, and I think that's what's exciting to see is, I see changes in the landscape in my own farm area where I live in Pine City. I can see more cover, different tillage, ideas and new crops, but I also think about where are we going and what are we doing? I think a lot about, scalability was one of the things I thought was, okay, how do we get to, I'm into this bigger picture piece. So people have heard me say many times, depends on who you say, 24 or 25 million acres of farmland. We grow 8 million acres of corn, 8 million acres, 7 million acres of soybeans. And then we drop all the way down to just over 1 million acres of wheat. And we've been losing wheat acres consistently for the last 10 years. Then we drop down to about 500,000 acres of sugar beets. So then where do those acres go? And what I like what Forever Green's doing is putting a goal into that so that we do have something to focus on, that we are looking at how we're doing that. I also like that we're doing things that, compeers here, finance. This is something since we started with Blue Lands, Green Water many, many years ago, and we talked about this, because I could say, I can go to the bank when I was a young farmer and everything, I can get a loan to plant corn, beans, grains, but if I want to try something different, you're on your own. So just excited about that and continue. I'm glad Cargill and different pieces on that, but a lot of possibilities on that. It's kind of what I think a lot about.
Thanks a lot, Commissioner. So, Madison, again, our combined question is, what are your thoughts on this vision of CLC agriculture, and how does it relate to your own personal work that you're doing, the project that you're carrying out with River Rock Kitchen and baking?
Cool. Sorry, it's Montana. Nope, that's fine. Okay, so what do I think of the vision? I think it's exciting. I think it's important. I have 3 young kids, and obviously looking to their future is a big part of the reason I do this work. How does it relate to what we do? So back in 2024, we received a CLC grant for developing markets. So what we did is, I have a good friend, Ben Penner, in the back. We've worked together, known each other since 2011 or somewhere around there. And he told me about Kernza, and I thought it was really interesting. And it kind of hit all the points that are important to me as far as organic, sustainable, having an environmental impact, all the things I look to do in my business. And we were chatting one day behind the bakery, and it was always like, well, how do you incorporate this into, how do you get somebody to buy a Kernza cake or a Kernza muffin or this product? And we came up with this idea of, well, what if instead of making this one Kernza thing, you incorporate Kernza into a lot of what we do? So we make a lot of different products. What we received the grant to do was incorporate 2% Kernza into 75% of our baked goods. So the idea is that instead of trying to sell people on this one Kernza cake or this one Kernza cookie, it's just part of what we do, and trying to have a bigger impact there. So this work being here is really exciting to me, and it's important because it continues to fuel that excitement, that innovation, and the importance. And I don't know, I think there's something powerful about being in a room full of other people that share that vision. So yeah, that's how it impacts what we do. It's work that we hope to continue doing after the grant and trying to really be a leader in that and show other businesses how you can do it. Yeah.
Montana, thanks a lot for that, both what you said and the whole project that you have. So Lyle, let's move along to you. Again, the question is, what are your thoughts on this vision of CLC agriculture, and how does that relate to the work that you do at Cargill?
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to the conference. It's been absolutely wonderful. So the way that we look at this project, or the way that we look at CLC agriculture in Cargill, it really aligns with what it is that we're trying to do both here in the US and as well as globally. So a few years ago, we made a commitment on improving, I think it was 10 million acres of trying to generate regenerative agriculture. So we've launched programs, we've tried to drive incentives for farmers, and what drew us to CLC agriculture, what drew us to the programs that we're working with the university on, is there's an opportunity now to create the economic engine to really propel. And I talk internally about how we're trying to push the flywheel to get these projects started, to get them moving, to get them invested and actually create these market opportunities, because that's what really drives the environmental benefits that we've talked about. It talks about, or we drive the social benefits, talking about lifting farmers up, and really creating that healthy ecosystem. So overall, overarching for Cargill, for what we're trying to do, both here in Minnesota, the US, globally, it aligns so perfectly to what we're trying to do as our company to lift up farmers around the world and be a more sustainable organization.
Thank you, Lyle. That's very heartening to hear. Haley Burns, what would you say around this CLC vision and how it fits into your own work at Builders?
Sure, thanks, Nick. So Builders Vision is a relatively new family office, and we're really working on systemic change around food, agriculture, oceans, and energy. But long before Builders Vision was an actual office, our principal, Lucas, has always been driven by a passion for food and agriculture and this desire for our agriculture system to really benefit both humans and the planet. So around 10 years ago, he met someone from the Land Institute and became really inspired and interested in this idea of perennial agriculture. And then shortly after, organized a trip to the University of Minnesota to learn about Forever Green. And then some of his very first agriculture-related grants from his personal giving was to the Land Institute and to Forever Green. And I think this really speaks to his understanding of the multifaceted ecosystem and human health benefits that come from these kinds of cropping systems. And in many ways, our agriculture program, which started in 2022, really grew out of these grants, and continuous living cover and perennial agriculture is still a really core part of our vision. And our work is more broadly about crop diversification as a climate mitigation strategy in the Midwest. But if I look around this room, I see many of our grantees, and I think it speaks to what many of us have been talking about all day, is this collaborative approach and this systems approach, moving out of just research but into the real world. Finding policy solutions that can help enable the work and market-based solutions. And that's what we are really excited about at Builders Vision, is these private sector partnerships that can build real-life supply chains and take the crops out of the lab and into the real world, where we can see scale and start to see landscape-level transformation.
Thanks a lot, Haley. And I see you're seated between market-based solutions and policy solutions. So let's segue to Mr. Policy Solution there. Steve Morse, what do you think of the CLC vision, and how does it relate to what you're trying to do in Minnesota Environmental Partnership?
Okay. So I love it. I absolutely love it. And of course, I've been engaged with this work for quite some time. And yeah, you know, it's a good, Haley, you're in a good spot because you encompass both these worlds, right? I love the fact that collaboration and boldness came out in the word puzzle, because to me that just makes a lot of sense and speaks to what we're doing here. From Minnesota Environmental Partnership's perspective, we are a 70-plus strong organization, 70-plus organizations strong coalition, I should say. So 70 different organizations, environmental, conservation, with a wide range of opinions. But we've been involved, this is just finishing our 14th session where we have been championing Forever Green and funding for Forever Green. And what part of our work is to Engage a diversity of organizations and voices in the group. So we have a number of our member groups here today, but there are many groups who are supportive of Forever Green and have spoken up for it, who are not here today. But part of our work is to engage them, help people understand Forever Green, and also help bring those voices into the public policy discussion. And I'm really happy to say, over the last 14 years, we brought over $30 million of state money into the Forever Green, including the CLC work that you're just talking about here. So we've been an important key player, and that the reason we are is, as Whitney laid out so well, not just water, but on other factors, it's pretty clear we're not going to get to some of our solutions, like to water quality, without doing these types of strategies, without thinking or changing. It's really, here's the way I think about it. It's transformational change for agriculture. We're developing a new system, and we're working on all the pieces here. But what is sometimes even more difficult than the research that we've heard so much about, and we're going to hear so much about on developing the crops, is we also have to transform the way people think about agriculture and the way they think about how we get these other needs out of our agricultural systems that you referenced, Nick. And so what I find is that this thinking is so good, but what we need to do is engage more people. So I'm really happy to see the engagement. But we need to think about how people can think differently so that we're not just tweaking the systems we have, but we're actually thinking about how we add new elements to the systems, which are the new crops that we're bringing in. So to us, as we think about climate, as we think about habitat, as we think about water quality, we have to come up with systems that move beyond maybe the 20th century industrial model, where we've gotten really good about growing lots of bushels of grain at low cost, but with higher external costs, and think about new systems that are more encompassing and bring us all these other benefits. So it squarely fits within our work, and we understand that we can't just talk and think and work with environmental advocates. In order to be effective and to make it all work, the reason we're engaged in the partnership is we need to think about all the other players, bring them to the table, and actually think about how we create a new system. So really excited to be here and just so excited to see so many people.
Thanks a lot, Steve. All right, we now turn to Carmen Fernholz. I'm not sure if you are Mr. Farm-Based Solution or Mr. Community Theater-Based Solution. I think it might be a little of both. But what do you think about CLC agriculture, and how does it fit into what you're trying to do, Carmen?
Again, I feel so, I'd like to be back out on the farm is where I'd like to be. But it's really a privilege to be here. But I think you're all aware of the vision, so I'm just going to shoot a couple of bullets and one-liners at you that I was picking up this morning. And I said, first of all, to me, in order for the vision to be successful, it has to build a relationship. A relationship, a relationship, a relationship among everybody. There's nobody except it. Everybody's got to be in it. Secondly, it's a long-term project. It's not going to happen overnight. I look back when I was doing organics 50 years ago, and it took us 50 years to get where it is today. Long-term project. It does encompass systemic change. We got to change what's up here. All of us. We've got to look at things differently. And we have to think about how we make this vision create value across society for everyone. No exceptions there as well. And then I think if we do this, we will, as I said last night, live out the understanding that a totally free society is a society empowered with opportunities for creative, responsible, magnitude-sensitive decision-making skills. I think all of those things come into play. And then a couple other bullets. It's teamwork, collaboration. Don't go it alone. As Wes Jackson has said many times, eyes to acres. By getting people engaged, we get the eyes to acres. And it's always a two-way street. It's between me as a farmer and the university. It's between me and as a farmer and industry. is between me and, as a farmer, and the university. It's always a two-way street. Whichever street you're on, it's always a two-way street. And I think we have to ask the question then, we've got the vision, so what do we do with it? So here's the question. How serious is our concern about the health of our soil, about the health of our water, about the health of our air, and most importantly, the people who are dependent on these resources? How serious are we? How serious? And finally, it appears to me that the tools and the personnel are there. Are we going to use them? Are we going to use them the way we need to use them? And I speak as a farmer because I need to, as a farmer, really step up and take advantage of these tools. And finally, success is dependent on going beyond my farm, beyond Minnesota, beyond the Midwest, beyond national, and globally. So that is what I want to leave you with, and most importantly, two things. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And finally, believe that we can make change. Thank you.
Carmen, thank you so much for that. We see why Carmen and Don Wyse got along. Don used to say, I have a PhD. That means I have a doctorate in philosophy. And Don was never shy to think in philosophical terms, along with what herbicide do we use to deal with which weed. And you can see how he and Carmen would get along in that way. So finally, Rachel Stroer, president of the Land Institute. How does CLC vision figure in your thinking and in what the Land Institute is trying to do and has been doing for the past 50+ years?
Great, thanks, Nick. And thank you for not having me go first. And thank you, Thom, for going first. I also took a risk here on the end. In terms of the CLC vision and what we've heard this morning, I think it is a practical vision and also adequately radical, and most importantly, necessary. We just can't feed ourselves under the current system, and so we need to change it wholly. And so I would say that the systemic approach is also necessary, to echo that from others. And I would say that in all of these ways, the CLC vision is very much similar, the same in many aspects to the Land Institute's vision, has been for a long time. We like to think of ourselves as the birthplace of Kernza, perennial grain, but U of M was the birthplace of the father of Kernza, Lee DeHaan. So I don't know where it started, but Don was Lee's advisor, and he had looked for a place where he could breed perennial grains, and there was one place in the world to do that, and it was the Land Institute, and he's been there ever since. So we've been connected for a very long time to the work that's happening at Forever Green. Specifically, our work is focused on the perennial grain portion of the CLC crop portfolio, perennial oil seed, Silphium integrifolium, and also Kernza perennial grain. More notably, I wanted to say that so in the Land Institute is focused sort of geographically in the Central Great Plains. But a lot of the Kernza work is happening up here in the upper Midwest, so there's a lot of good connection. And another focus of the Land Institute is on the global work that's happening. Kernza, I would say, is already a model. So all of the pain and suffering that Carmen and others have endured to help get Kernza pastries on our plates is now lesson and model for our partners in the EU, in Japan, and Ukraine, and other places. So very much so, it is already a model for global places that are deeply rooted in their regions. And the land, one of the roles that the Land Institute plays and kind of commits to continue is to coordinate and ensure the continuity of the global work and the hubs like here in the upper Midwest, like in the global South, in Africa and other perennial grains. So it's already having a big influence. So thank you all for contributing to that and influencing the global reach in that way.
Thank you, Rachel. And thank you especially for that international work. That's very significant to have that Land Institute is playing that role. So the first question is about markets. And it says, the so-called free market is not free. How can markets be incentivized, i.e. publicly funded, to support real environmental performance? And I'm wondering if the panel has any thoughts about how we really build on this idea of markets for the good environmental things that CLC agriculture does. Commissioner?
Right. Just real quickly, too, one other thing, too, I just think on the market and this whole thing I didn't mention, but it's just the impact in helping us solve our nitrate issues in Minnesota and the wind piece on this, just really promising. But on markets, this was what always drew me to Forever Green, what I was saying before, where I could grow this or that, and, but you got to have a market, and that's kind of an old farmers union principle. You have a market, you got to have a price if you're a farmer. And, I always look at hemp, we don't talk about hemp a lot, but we kind of started hemp the same time we started a lot of the Forever Green crops in the state. And it was always interesting to me when we put in hemp, I forget what year it was, 2017, 2018, corn was like $2 and, a bushel. And we had farmers throwing quite a few acres of hemp. They just didn't have they could grow it, but there wasn't a market for it. So we still have hemp in barns that farmers grew or in storage. And actually the market's finally coming along where we reduced our acres. We got up to about 7,000 acres. Then we went all the way down to about 1,500 acres. Now this year we're going to be back up to about 4,000 acres. But just kind of that thing. But the market, we finally got a couple people to manufacturing. Same thing where we're seeing with a lot of the Forever Green crops, we're starting to see the market. And so as a department, what we've done with help from a lot of the groups in this room is have the CLC grants that are going to the Elderberry Cooperative, the Hazelnut Tree Range Farms, Perennial Promise, all these different groups. There's a lot of them that are doing these really cool things. We also did a thing, we brought back cooperative development grants at the state. So for new co-ops, and encourage folks to look at that. It was something we lost early on in my career through budget cuts, and I always worked on keeping the language around. And then lo and behold, I became commissioner, and I was like, guess what we're going to put some money into? But that's the idea, is to try to have some of these resources as a state that would help grow those markets. And one other thing too is we have a marketing department at our agency that's working with these groups to help get them to these food buyers or food companies. We have an entity that I'm president of called Food Export Midwest that also works on scaling a lot of the different food products. And then you're going to hear about SAF this afternoon and all the different projects. So all that, I feel, is a lot of positive things going on that we can continue to work on and continue to invest in to help that along.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. So Mr. Policy-Based Solution would like a word.
That's a big mantle to bear, but and there are a lot of things that can be done that come to mind, but as we are thinking about policies as we move into new markets, so thinking about, for example, sustainable aviation fuel, thinking about clean transportation fuels, as we develop new policies, what we failed to do in the past is accurately or even in any way account for the additional benefits of these crops that we're talking about, right? So as we're thinking about SAF, how do we make sure, for example, that the benefits of no indirect land use are calculated into the price so that these crops have some benefit? Or think about the water quality benefits that we could maybe pay a premium for some of these crops, so that we have to start to recognize the economic value that we're returning for these other benefits rather than just the bushels of grain. And there are lots of levers to do that in government policy, and we just need to make sure that happens and we get treated fairly in that way.
Thanks a lot, Steve. Carmen, would you like to chime in?
Just a couple quick points. Marketing is critical from the farmer's perspective, because if I can't make money on it, I can't grow it. But I think so that's going to impact how we deal with policy. How does policy protect the market? And it goes to the point of, remember when soybeans came around, there weren't too many acres of soybeans, but a lot of people started growing them. But you look at the countryside today, and all it is corn and soybeans. And we don't want that to happen to the other crops, the kernsas, the pennycresses and that. We want to maintain a diversified landscape. And that will depend on the value of the market and how, whether we like it or not, policy will dictate a lot of that market. Because look at current policy on growing corn and soybeans. We have to protect that market with policy. I want to emphasize that from a farmer's perspective, because I live it every day.
Montana, do customers seek out Kernza? And are they excited about it? Do they consider it a premium product? What are you seeing?
I would say there's a huge education piece still for the general public that we're working on. We have people on both sides. We have people that seek it out. We have people that are really interested, and I still get asked every day, what's Kernza? So we've got both. I don't know that people see it. I would speak to the general public. I don't know that people see it as a premium product yet. I think they see it as a higher priced product, and once they understand why and the reasons, the environmental impacts and all the things that make it special, usually if those people are looking at it, seeking it out, they're willing to pay that price. But I would say generally it's a mixed bag. I think that part of what I find really interesting and a way that I can have an impact, because I'm a wholesale bakery, so I have time of year 10 to 15 different accounts that I work with in about an hour radius. So I'm not reaching the same customers. I'm not one coffee shop. And so as far as the education piece, going back to that, it gives me an opportunity to educate and to I don't know, spread the word about that and try and get people to see it as that. But I wouldn't say we're there yet.
Wonderful. Thanks. Where does Cargill see agriculture being in 10 years? And, you know, how does CLC figure in that? And if I'm getting into confidential business information, do let us know.
Well, that's a softball. Where is agriculture going to be in 10 years? So I think let's preface. Cargill's been around for 160 years. I think we're just coming up on our 160th anniversary in the next year or two. So we've been around for a long time. There has been tremendous change in agriculture over the last 160 years. If we think back how we used to farm those many years ago, we can probably think about the last 50 years. I heard about a 50-year farm and how things have likely changed. We can talk about the last 10 years and how things have changed in agriculture. I think to say, you know, what do we think the landscape will look like? It will be different. So will we see new regenerative crops on farm? Absolutely. I think the momentum that we're seeing right now behind projects like the camelina, the pennycress, we believe that they're going to continue to expand across the landscape. We're in pilot phase today. We expect those to continue to evolve. We anticipate other crops to come into the market space. There are other geographies in the United States that other crops we're going to fit into that will fit this style of production agriculture to be able to work on the regenerative phase. The underlying demands are still going to be there. We still need to eat. We still need to provide space for livestock. We still need to be able to create fibers. We still need to be able to fuel or provide energy for our homes. So those fundamentals will always be there, but how we do it is going to continue to change and evolve. So it's kind of a non-answer, but I know that the way it looks in 10 years is going to be vastly different than the way it looks today, and that's a good thing.
Well, thanks, Lyle. I think that's a very, very hopeful vision that you provided for us. And I think it's a good way to close the panel. But let's do that by thanking all of these panelists.